Welcome. Don't adjust your dial. Chillin'. A beautiful Sunday afternoon, or Tuesday for everyone else, or Wednesday or Friday, or whatever day it is for you. Lofi Poli Sci, as always, coming at you. Michael Pickering here, bringing us this next installment of our 9-part mini-series, Our World in Numbers. And this series is all about development in the world today, looking at top 10 list of things like GDP, GDP per capita, Gini, and HDI. But we've done all that before. Now, we're getting to the other end of the spectrum. Today, we're doing 10 countries with the lowest GDPs in the world, 2021. And as a bit of refresher for all you lo-fi listeners out there, GDP, aka Gross Domestic Product, is the total market value of all final goods and services produced within a country in a given period of time, usually a calendar year. And our data come from the IMF. That's the International Monetary Fund. And they are estimates for 2021 because, well, 2021 was a bit of a wonky year, you hear? And the World Bank, for some reason, still does not have GDP data for 2021. Curious, is it not? Bonus point to whomever can find out why that is and send it on in. But it has to be official and legit. But enough of that. To the list, let's go! And coming in at number 10. Number 10 is St. Vincent and the Grenadines with a GDP of $769 million in 2021. Number 9, Dominica with a GDP of $571 million. Number 8, Sao Tome and Principe at $534 million. Number 7, Tonga at $501 million. Number 6, Micronesia with $404 million. And now to our bottom 5. Number 5, Marshall Islands with a GDP of $241 million in 2021. Number 4 is Kiribati at $232 million. Number 3, Palau at $208 million. Number 2, Nauru at $133 million. And number 1, the country with the lowest GDP in the world for 2021 is Tuvalu, $65 million. But now, let's dig a little deeper into what this list really means. And firstly, it would be completely understandable if you've heard of almost no countries on this list. I mean, there are about 200 countries in the world, and these 10 here rarely get talked about. But if you did hear of at least a couple of these, you might realize something. And you may have dug a little deeper. And if you did, you'd quickly realize that every single country on this list, they're all small islands or a collection of small island countries. So this list is a weird, geologically biased list already. But then we have to wonder, what's the island thing got to do with GDP? And the answer isn't so much a question about islands, but the size of the islands and the size of the countries. Remember how we said back in our first list of the top 10 GDP countries that gross domestic product, as a variable, is biased toward countries with large populations? Well, that becomes incredibly obvious with this list of the lowest GDP countries in the world. Our number 1, Tuvalu, with a GDP of $65 million a year, only has a population of, wait for it, in 2020, estimated population of about 11,700 people. Whereas our number 1 country of all GDPs, the US, has a population of over or around 330 million people. 330 million versus 11,700. So yeah, a massive difference in the size of the economies of these countries, because the size of the population of these countries, and because GDP as a development indicator does not take into account population size. So, what do? Do we just throw this list away? Because it's so damn obviously biased? And straight up, I'd say no, not so fast. And while I would say when we ask that question, we always do, does this list even matter? I'd say by itself, no, the list does not matter. But put together with other lists, especially the top 10 GDP countries list, I'd say this list provides wonderful perspective on just how biased GDP really is as a development indicator. I think this list illustrates perfectly why you can't use just one variable to tell someone how developed a country is. I mean, for real, what if, I don't know. Let's say you pin Tuvalu as a developing country when you look at it just by GDP, because it's last on the list. But then you decide to divide the GDP by, I don't know, the population? Well then, couldn't it theoretically, possibly, turn Tuvalu into a developed country? Well, for that answer, you'll have to wait for next week's list of the 10 lowest GDP per capita countries of 2021. But something else this list illustrates quite well is global income inequality across the 200 countries of the world. You can add all the 10 countries on our list today, add up all their GDPs together, and still not even get close to South Korea's $1.8 trillion GDP of 2021. And South Korea was only number 10 on the top 10 GDP countries list. These two lists together show us that there are massive differences in the amount of money that countries have to work with in order to improve the quality of life of their people. But again, we can't assume too much about the extent of that income disparity between these countries on these two lists, not without first taking population into account, as well as some other variables too. But all in all, I dig this list a lot, because it's just the beginning of showing us how flawed development measures are, and how diverse our planet really is. And that's this Tuesday's Top 10 list. Check out our newest blog from Friday on LofiPoliSci.com. Check out Letters of the Lofi Poli Sci from a couple weeks ago. Always remember that Lofi Poli Sci is more than just me. It's the we that we be. Talk to you soon, Lo-Fi listeners. Pickering, signing off. A little side thought for all you listeners that stuck around. Do you know, if you add up the GDPs of our top 7 countries on this list, Tuvalu, Nauru, Palau, Kiribati, Marshall Islands, Micronesia, and Tonga, you get about $1.78 billion, which is less than the $1.8 billion that the movie Spider-Man No Way Home made. Spider-Man, a comic book superhero movie, made more money in 1 month than the top 7 countries on our list combined in the entire calendar year of 2021.